Hello, my name is Glenn Dyer, and you're watching a Dyer-Situation. Today I'm seeing Ouija 2, Origin of Evil. Yay, Blumhouse is back! Oh man. Jeez, Blumhouse has been pretty light this year. I mean, there was The Darkness. I think that was it. And that was all the way back at the beginning of the year. I guess they're just taking a break. Maybe next year they'll be back in full force with another 12 Insidious sequels or something. I don't know. Yeah, out of morbid curiosity, I decided to watch the original Ouija. And it didn't start off very bad. That is a pretty nice thing to say about a Blumhouse film. But then again, The Darkness didn't start off very bad. The first scene was pretty good. Although this one, it lasted for probably the first half was alright. But then it started to reach Insidious territory, wherein it became less about horror and more about very silly, spooky monster jumping out at people and wrestling them and stuff. Like, it's... yeah, towards the end, this got very silly. I think Blumhouse might struggle with this. And to be honest, a lot of people do, like, especially with a supernatural horror film. Like, at what point do you keep it... how exactly do you keep it from getting silly? I mean, even the movies that are considered great don't tend to do this very well. Like A Nightmare on Elm Street, my least favorite scene is the climax where Freddy Krueger is pulled out of the dream world and then by Nancy, and then goes through a bunch of Home Alone traps and gets beat up by him. It's silly. Like, even there, in what is normally considered a really good movie, and the rest of it is, that climatic scene becomes just silly. It's part of the reason why the third movie is a lot better, but, so I think they just struggle in that department, because this is the same thing. The climax got really silly, and stopped being horror for a little while. But here I think is the big difference, why Nightmare on Elm Street is still a pretty darn good movie, and why Ouija and movies like it are just not. Like, I think the main important thing here is establishing the rules, and establishing it in a concise and realistic manner. That's what Nightmare on Elm Street did. From pretty early on, we learned that Freddy Krueger attacks you in your dreams. He can't attack you in the real world, only if you're kind of falling asleep. And you have to be asleep in order to have the dream, so if you stay awake for a while, he won't be able to get you. And later on, when it's coming time to think of a counter plan, we learn, just from a pretty natural series of events, that if you're holding on to something in the dream world and you wake up, you have that thing with you in the real world. And that's what gives Nancy the idea to pull him into the real world and deal with him there. Alright? See, that was doled out quite naturally, and the audience gets a pretty good understanding of what's going on. That's part of the reason I really, really liked It Follows, because it was also like that, really naturally doled out the exposition. This movie and a lot of Blumhouse films seem completely unable to do so. It kind of baffles me, because they doled out information on how the Ouija board works, like all the rules for that. But I get the feeling that's because it's a kid's game, and it came pre-packaged with rules. But the rest of the movie, I don't think even the writers themselves understand specifically how these ghosts work, or what exactly they do, or what they want, or how they, or what kind of weaknesses or strengths they have. Like, that's in most Blumhouse movies. They're very poorly defined rules. And what rules are given are usually in a really, really terrible expositionary manner. Basically, their typical one is that they find some sort of expert, be it in the form of some knowledgeable professor or a really convenient web page that tells them exactly what they need to know. It's not wrong in any way. It tells them every single detail about what's going on. They did that in Unfriended. They did that in Insidious with the medium lady. They do that here at the very end with the Hispanic woman who just so happens to know how all this stuff works. It's kind of the Candyman thing from the Final Destination movies. Just somebody who's really knowledgeable about this stuff for no clearly defined reason. Although at least there, he's kind of hinted to be a supernatural figure himself, so you kind of get the feeling he knows it because he is it, in a way. But in this, no, if you need something, just Google it, you'll find the answer. Probably the worst example is The Darkness, where once again they stumble upon a really convenient YouTube video that tells them literally every single thing they need to know. It is so poorly done, so badly written that way. And that's what a lot of them seem to struggle with. Just, what are the rules and how do we dish them out? I don't know. See, that's kind of the attitude that they take, and it makes the movie far less enjoyable and far less scary. If you don't know what's going on, you can't be scared by it. You need to know at least a little, and then have your imagination fill in the rest. But we don't even know that little bit. And also, I have to bring this up just because it's a little worrying. I think Blumhouse might be trying to start a cinematic universe here. Like, my first clue was in this movie, like how I mentioned, it's very similar to Insidious, and just how it doles out the information, how it gets really silly towards the end. And it also shares an actress with there. Like, the lady who played the medium in Insidious also plays this crazy old lady who doles out exposition in OUIJA. Like, similar type of character in both movies. If that weren't enough, the Hispanic lady I mentioned, she is very similar to the Hispanic lady, mother and daughter, who were in The Darkness, and who doled out exposition and eventually defeated the spooky demon ghosts, or helped to defeat them. So I'm wondering if eventually they're going to have some sort of crossover movie thing happen. Sinister versus Insidious or something. You know, as much as I think that sounds like the ultimate in campy, and I would love to see them try, I really don't see how it could possibly work. Mostly because, though all these monsters and aliens and whatever that are in these Blumhouse movies, though they might look different, though they might have different names, though they might have different backstories, they operate in almost exactly the same way. They spend a while moving shit invisibly to freak people out, and then eventually they show their face and act all spooky and then murder people in undefined ways. And that's how all these Blumhouse monsters work. Like, they all operate in exactly the same way. It's no Freddy versus Jason, where Freddy is the guy who hides inside of people's dreams, who likes to torture, who likes to take his time and really find a way to totally screw with someone. And then there's Jason, who just stabs whatever the hell he sees. You know, there's no real difference between all these Blumhouse characters, with the exception of the Skype ghost from Unfriended, which only really does all the fucking with people stuff on a virtual space, which makes it funnier. So, yeah, if they are planning that, I would say, it probably wouldn't be as entertaining as I think, because literally it'd be very difficult to tell which one is operating at which time. So, yeah. Oh well, they probably aren't anyway. I don't think people are that interested in that stuff. So yeah. Anyway, getting back to this movie. Judging by the name, Origin of Evil, I'm guessing this is going to be the origin of either the Ouija board or of the spooky ghosts from the first movie. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're pulling in Insidious 3 on us. They're just, man, you know, going back in time and telling a totally different story or something. At least they're not calling it Ouija Chapter 2. Jeez. So, yeah. That's about it. Well, let's get this over with. And I'm back. Honestly, I think that was better than the first one. And the funniest part about that is, I think it's mostly because they almost completely abandoned the horror elements. In fact, the worst parts of the movie are when they try to do horror elements. When they stick to the fantasy aspect of just, just like communicating with the spirit realm and stuff. Like, it's actually kind of fun, and the characters are interesting and relatable, and it's like, it's basically a story of like a struggling mom and her 2 kids, and the mom is practicing, fake, readings and stuff in order for money and all that. And yet still, despite living on a fortune teller's paycheck, she's, living in a really nice looking 2-story house. Don't know how that works, but, generally enjoyable at that point, but like the first one, kinda screws it up towards the end when it does start focusing more on the horror stuff. And it's not even just the fact that, like, it's not very good horror, well, no, it is the fact that it's not very good horror. The main thing that they focus in on is the little girl getting a big long mouth face and screaming and going, ah, like that. Guys, this isn't 2005. That isn't scary anymore. It just looks silly. I don't know what they don't get about that. That hasn't been scary for a very, very long time. But they just kept doing it over and over. But nonetheless, it is pretty darn good. Not great, not It Follows, not anything like that, but it is good. Certainly, probably really damn good on the Blumhouse scale. This is probably right at the top of the Blumhouse scale. In fact, it barely seems like Blumhouse at times. Like, they actually showed restraint at moments. It's like, ooh. Because in one scene, like, we see this girl, one of the girls got nightmares and stuff. We see her, like, go back to, lay back in bed going to sleep and stuff. And in the background, if you're paying attention, you can see this ghostly dark figure with glowing bright eyes. But it's really quick, and there isn't a musical sting accompanying it. So it's literally just in the background to kind of creep you out subconsciously. Wow. Blumhouse normally never thinks to do that. That's pretty cool. Now then again, they do ruin that later by having the monster show up as a big CGI spooky, scary thing, but what are you gonna do? And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say, except there is one other thing. I don't know what the hell's going on with this, but they bookended it as the movie's set in the 1960s, and they bookended it like a movie from the 1960s. Even though the movie style itself is absolutely nothing like the 1960s, they still have a little MGM title card at the beginning, like an old Western would have. And then when the end credits come up, it's just like how a 1960s movie would end, with those style of credits. I'm not sure what they're implying by that. And also, every now and then, you'd see a little film scratch. Like this is an old VHS tape or something. This isn't a found footage movie or anything. And certainly, the movie doesn't appear to be shot on film. They added that in post. What were they trying to imply with that? I'm racking my brain trying to figure out what that meant. What was the purpose of that? It made no sense to me. Yeah, it's just strange. I'm not sure why they did that. So yeah. If you want to see a half-decent horror film, go see this. It's pretty good. I wouldn't bother seeing the original OUIJA unless you really feel like it. It doesn't add much. In fact, I think it kind of subtracts a little because you kind of already know the ending going in. So yeah, skip the original and just watch this if you could. So yeah. That's about it. So until next time, I'm Glenn Dyer, and you have been watching A Dire Situation.